And today we have another guest like we did yesterday to help us think a little bit more about this topic. She shares some of her own story. So it's my pleasure to invite to the Bima Ellin Bessner. She's a Canadian journalist, author, and speaker based here in Toronto. Since the spring of 2021, she hosts a podcast, the CJN Daily for the Canadian Jewish News, sponsored by Metropia. It's a bite-sized look at news about Canada's Jewish community. She's also the author of a book about Canada's 17,000 Jewish servicemen and women who fought in the Second World War. The book is called Double Threat: Canadian Jews, the Military in World War II. It's an excellent book. I encourage everyone to take a look at it. Just as a side note, we have in the back corner of the room, we have a Jewish war veterans dedicated area to those who have served in the military here in Canada. Ellin was born in Montreal, graduated with a degree in journalism and political science from Carleton University. Her career as a journalist took her around Canada and around the world. She's worked for CTV, CBC News, freelance for Globe and Mail, Canadian Press, and other organizations. A foreign correspondent based in Rome, Italy. And aside from reporting on the Vatican, the Mafia, and Italian food, fashion, and opera, she also reported on Italian soccer. She covered several brutal civil wars in Africa, interviewed the late Prince Philip and the Dalai Lama, was a business anchor for many years at Report on Business Television, now BNN. In her spare time, she enjoys playing Mahjong Gardens and loves the Outlander series. Living in Richmond Hill, joining us with her husband, John. And they have two sons. One is a physicist, and the other is a data analyst. And it's a pleasure, Ellin, to welcome you to our Bima and to have you join us today for Rosh Hashanah. Do you want to speak to us? Perfect.
Come over here?
Yeah, it's a perfect spot.
This mic is working. Hello? Okay, turn it around. Thank you. All right, I can even take it out and walk around like I like to do, because I'm short. Can you all hear me? Good. Thank you so much, Rabbi Sachs, Cantor Edwards. It's so great to hear you again. We miss you. Our cousin got COVID 2 weeks ago, so it was a little rough yesterday. But our loss is your gain, because I'm a member of Beit Reim Synagogue in Richmond Hill. I want to thank you so much, Rabbi, for reminding people. The last time I was on this Bima was the week, it was November 11th, Remembrance Day before COVID, who remembers? And the previous rabbi was so kind. He was the first one in Canada to order 20 copies of my book, Double Threat, have me come to his office and sign them, and then speak to you on Shabbat about the 17,000 Canadians of Jewish faith who served in the Second World War. I couldn't sell any because it was Shabbat, sadly, but literally this synagogue was the first one to support telling the stories of all the brave Canadians who helped stop Hitler and rescue the survivors of the Holocaust. So I'll always be grateful to this congregation. You mentioned a little bit about me. You didn't say I was supposed to be a lawyer, because everyone in my family are judges and lawyers, but I hated calculus, so I didn't pass the course, and I didn't have the marks. I still never use calculus, honestly, today. And I'm 60 years old. But I ended up going into journalism, which was probably the best choice anyway, because I love to talk. I'm a natural storyteller, and so I've been so honored to have this career as a journalist for the past 40-odd years. But being Jewish in journalism, it's hard enough to be a woman with gray hair in journalism, but it's a lot harder to be a Jewish woman in journalism in Canada, because you can't really, when I was growing up, talk about your community or Israel or anything in the newsroom or on air. You're not allowed to tell people what you care about in your personal life. That's how we were brought up. So, and I was one of the few openly Jewish reporters in those days in the newsroom. So in my 40-year career, I got to do 3 stories on Jewish things. And that's saying a lot, because every day in journalism, you do something else. But how does the CJN, the Canadian Jewish News, come into play? Well, like many of you, my parents used to get it, and every time it came every week, it was like a national holiday, and everything stopped, and you read it from cover to cover. Then when the rabbi's sermon was boring, you brought it to shul, and you read it in your talis bag, right? No offense. Not your services. And so when I went to Normandy 11 years ago and found this grave with a Jewish star on it, and it launched my new career, my renewed career as a speaker and historian, CJN published the first chapter, and then they did a review, and then I launched a new career. I renewed and pivoted and became a lecturer and speaker all around the world about the brave Jews who served in World War II and then to the Holocaust. And in sort of every audience I get to, especially the non-Jewish ones, they ask me about why does everyone hate Jews? And I kind of become the, why is there anti-Semitism? And I become the, ambassador for Jewish people, which is kind of a daunting thing. So I try not to go into because it could take 4 hours and, they don't give you that long. And then the pandemic hit. And it became a secret dream for me to work for the CJN, which is kind of dumb because I gave up a 6-figure career to work for free. But anyway, that's what I did. CJN, as you know, stopped publishing and the pandemic hit right after Pesach in 2020, and many of you probably were as devastated as I was not to get the paper. The offices closed, people were laid off. And because there was no advertising, because all the Jewish organizations stopped having events. So no advertising, no dollars, we couldn't afford to pay rent. I wasn't working for them then. I was teaching journalism at Centennial College, where I was for 20 years a professor of broadcasting. And then the founders of the Jewish newspaper said, you know what? We need to have a voice to connect the Jewish community when everyone's in lockdown. They can't go to shul except eventually on Zoom. I don't know if you guys did Zoom. Did you do Zoom services? Okay, we did too, but not all shuls did. Communities, everything stopped. So they came to me and said, would you launch a podcast like the New York Times Daily, but for Canada? And I was teaching on Zoom at the time, and I danced around the kitchen and I said, H-E-L-L, yes. And I retired that next spring from my job, really secure 10-year job with a great benefits, to work for free, almost free, to launch the CJN Daily. And it's because no one else in the world has done anything like it that I'm so proud to tell you about it. Okay, besides the rabbi and Cantor Edwards' wife, who else listens to the CJN Daily? All right, 1 of you, 2 of you, yay. Tell me later, I'll give you a shout out, as I do. But it's 10 to 15 minutes, Monday to Thursday, on stories that you cannot find anywhere else. And we'll get into that. And I can be openly passionate about the community I care about without having to be worried that my manager is going to fire me from, never mind the gray hair, but for being openly Jewish and doing stories about the 400,000 Canadians of Jewish faith who live in this country and around the world, and Israel, and in Florida and Arizona in the winter, where I report from live on location from my mother's condo and recorded in her car, literally, because her house is very noisy. And actually, we don't actually know how many Jews there are in Canada. Wait till October 26th, the new census data is coming out, and we'll have a show on that the next day. But it's all free. You can get it on your phone. You can get it on your laptop. You can get it on your email. We do it 4 times a week. We blast them all out, including everything. Or just go to our website, thecjn.ca. Hold on. This is what it looks like. It looks like me. And am I allowed to do this? Here's the website, thecjn.ca. I wasn't allowed to sell books last time, but I'm going to darn well get you all to subscribe. Thecjn.ca. And tomorrow's episode is about the new cookbook with Bonnie Stern and her daughter, which I made 3 recipes this yontif. The puff pastry tomatoes didn't come out so well, but everything else was delicious. Anyway, I'm going to get going because I know I only have 5 minutes. All right. Why podcasts? Because 35 to 40% of North American people listen to podcasts. You can make it a habit. It's a friendly voice in your ear while you're walking the dog or doing dishes. And because with synagogues and shuls closed, the CJN said we need to have a place where people can have community in their ears and then share with each other what people are talking about, what Jewish Canada sounds like, which is what my podcast is about. But if you don't have time, or why do I need podcasts? We do have print. We have a magazine. It just came out this week. Some of you who subscribe may have gotten it. I brought free copies. They're on the table over there. 4 times a year, 75 pages. Plus, we have a newspaper every Friday. Yes, it's there. You have to print it yourself or read it on your tablet because we can't afford to do that anymore. And plus, the National Post stopped publishing Mondays. So everything is digital first. We have a full website. We have newsletters. We have Facebook. We have everything you need on all your socials. And it's an important community institution. Lastly, why should you support it? Because we do stories that no one else is covering, like Benjamin's, like El Al. I broke the Benjamin story. It's a controversial story about how the community's major funeral home has been in trouble with the Ontario government, 5 investigations on how they're overcharging people. They've been forced to pay back hundreds of families for overcharging them. I'm sure you've heard about it. I'll talk to you more about it afterwards. And YLL stopped flying to Toronto. And here's a scoop for you. I heard they're actually stopping October 1st, not October 27th, as they promised. So we'll be on that too. So I hope that shedding some light on stories you can't get anywhere else is important to you. Please support the CJN. It's $1.92 a week. That's it for a year. So it's worth it because you can renew your interest in Jewish Canada and you can hear yourself speak. And I'm so honored to be here. I wish you all a Shana Tova. Did you know, Rabbi, that the verb for Shana is also shinui, same letters, which means change and renewal. I stole that from Joel Chazanoff, the comedian. But I hope you all have a very happy, healthy, COVID-free Yantiv, and it's been an honor to be back at your synagogue. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure having you. It's funny, Joel's a friend of mine. Can I ask you a couple questions?
Yeah, sure.
So I thought just, it's funny actually, Joel Chazanoff is a friend of mine. We did a project together last year, a digital Passover Haggadah. It was
He's
a fun
hysterical.
project. But I wanted to dig in just a little bit deeper on that question of renewal a bit, if I could push you.
Yeah,
I'm
for sure.
curious, the CJN, I guess, realized at some point that it just wasn't sustainable, the model of what they were doing. All right, if they were going to continue to bring journalism and being really the main and best, no offense if anyone works for another one.
64 years old,
but
award-winning
a
Canadian
long-standing
newspaper.
award-winning Jewish paper, news service here in Canada, really the main source of Jewish news in Canada. To lose that, I know the community, when I talked to people, were very upset when it seemed like it was closing. So at what point was it that the CJN kind of realized that they could continue to offer the same award-winning journalism, right, the same in-depth interviews and news and everything they were doing, but in a different form? That digital was the way to go, that there was a way without just waiting till no one was buying papers and they had to close down, that there was another path forward for a modern world.
You know, the pandemic had a lot of horrible, terrible things. We lost thousands and thousands of grandparents, and it was horrible businesses. We won't go into it. But it was also a silver lining for the CJN in many ways. They had to pivot. They should have done it years ago, and it forced them to get lean and mean, and not mean, but lean and smarter, because they closed the office, no more overhead. Everybody works from home. And that saved a lot of money. And we do have thousands and thousands of dollars of advertising now, but it isn't in a print paper where you have to get trucks to go to people's houses and find someone to deliver it. And I miss the paper too. I love newspapers, but you know what? That's the way the world is. Everyone gets their news on their phone anyway, all the time, most people. And if you don't, then you are happy to print it out, and we have the print product. So we kind of have a legacy, but also go where, we always say fish where the fish are. Young people get their stuff on the phones. Young people get their stuff on tablets. Medium people like us get them on their tablets or iPads or phones too, so that's where we moved. It was a good thing.
I think synagogues had the same experience where they pivoted online because of the pandemic. It forced a lot of synagogues to engage very suddenly with new technology, and many of them found that they brought in new people. They were able to engage people that were previously unengaged by going to those formats. And you mentioned a little bit there, young people using their phones as their news. Have you found that there's a different demographic accessing the CJN now, that it's online and in these digital formats?
So
Have you
to
reached
be
a younger
100%
audience?
honest, we've lost a lot of the people who, for some, technology is just not a thing. But we're engaging people on Instagram. We're about to launch a TikTok. I'm not going to do it, but a younger person's going to launch a TikTok daily news 1 minute. Yeah, I have 400,000 downloads of my podcast, a little Jewish daily podcast, which comes out. It's the only one in Canada. That's like if every Jewish person in Canada listened once every day, we'd be Joe Rogan. That's my goal, is to be the Jew. Well, not really, but I want more people to listen, try it, that you won't hear anything like it. And then you share it on your phone with people who you think be like-minded, and that's how things go. And more people, I went to shul more during the pandemic on Zoom than I did before. And so the trick is keep those, teach people how to literally get it in 30 seconds on their email or their phone, and then you have new audiences who are younger, plus the traditional ones who pay. which is the key. You got to pay, because
thank-
otherwise we'll go out of business again. So there you go.
Thanks, Ellen,
Thank
so
you
much.
so much,
Shana
Shana
Tova.
Tova.
Thank you for joining us. And again, as we think about that theme of renewal and growth, we look towards how do we engage the next generation with the same values, the same traditions, the same meaning that Beth Torah has been for the last 60 years. I think it gives us something to think about the journey of the CJN and how they've renewed themselves for a new generation and a new world.